Okay, we are recording. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to copy some information into the chat, including the agenda and some accessibility information. So for your information, closed captioning is available on the desktop version of Microsoft Teams. To enable closed captioning, click the three dots at the top of the window and click Turn on Live Captions. Unfortunately, captioning is not available for the web browser version of Teams. So one moment while I paste that in. And then we will do roll call. All right. So going alphabetically, Michael Anderson.
Present.
Aaron Artiega. I don't think he's here. Okay. Anna Baliakova. Also not here. Okay. Mitchell Henke.
Here.
Montavious Jones. Kathleen Minnick.
Here.
Great. Ben Teal.
Here.
Okay. Barry Weber.
Present.
Awesome. Stephen Owen.
Here.
And Monica Walk-Smith.
Present.
Okay. All right. Hand it off to you.
Cool. Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is approving the minutes from last month's meeting. If anybody was able to review it, see if it looked okay. Motion to approve. Michael, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Kathy.
Thank you. Hearing no objections, the minutes from last month are approved. And we can move into our first discussion item, our presentation, I guess, for the Vision Zero Action Plan. Jessica presenting that, or
Jessica, are you here? I will reach out to Jessica and make sure she joins us. But yeah, go ahead with the meeting schedule.
can move that to later. The next item is upcoming protected bike lane projects. Is that Zach? Or somebody else from, or Mike? For upcoming protected bike lane projects.
Oh, sorry, I didn't catch
Is that you?
Yes, that is me. Okay. This is a pretty quick update because these projects are all very early stages. We do have one project on Michigan that's ready to be constructed this year. It'll be from 10th to Water. We have three projects that are kind of in early stages. They're doing some public involvement and starting design. Those are on Hopkins, 34th to Teutonia, Oklahoma, 6th to Howe, and Walnut, Lisbon from 20th to 40th. And then we have three more projects that have just started. Their limits are kind of funny to describe because they're made of several segments. One of them is mostly on 2nd Street from about Michigan and 2nd to Maple. One is on Center Street from, there's a section on Teutonia Locust, and then it goes to Center and Humboldt. And the last is on Sherman, Lisbon. It will go from Sherman North and then connect to Lisbon and 40th, that other project that I mentioned.
Or what was the one on 2nd?
2nd will go from Michigan and 2nd down to Maple and 2nd, and then one more little block on Maple to connect to 1st.
Is it, that's part of the KK River Trail connection?
It will connect to it. Yeah,
But it's not part, it's not that project?
correct. It's different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second in Michigan. And then to Maple? Second
Yes.
from Michigan to Maple?
So the Second Street one goes from Michigan and Second down Second Street all the way to Maple. And then there's like one extra little block on Maple from Second to First.
That's, I mean, that's almost the entire segment, Second, at least.
It's mostly Second Street. Yeah. And one other note, the Oklahoma project is planning on reaching out to you all to do a mini focus group for that project in a future meeting.
The last three are going to be constructed this year? Is that what you said?
The last three, no, they're just kicking off right now. We have selected consultants, but we still need to get like some approvals done before we can officially hire them and officially kick off.
And so those would be hopefully constructed later this year?
If I recall correctly, and everyone, all the other project managers, let me know if I'm correct. I think design will finish in 2026 for construction in 2027.
The Sherman to Lisbon is different engagement than the section of Lisbon that they just did a meeting for.
Yes, the one that they just did a meeting for was 20th to 40th. And then the second project that's just kicking off is going to come from 40th and then up to Sherman.
I think all of these should be reflected in the city's bikeways tracking map as well.
Yes. Which
I
is
can,
on,
I
Yeah,
can
you
share
can-
that if.
is there an update on the KK
Yep.
River
Do y'all see
connection?
my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this map is available on the city's website, and it shows all protected bikeways that are existing, kind of in the under construction, in the planning and design phase, or funded but design hasn't started. So you can see like the Second Street example that y'all were just talking about is now funded and will be starting design. That also includes, that small section of Sherman and Lisbon. Here's the stretch of Lisbon that Michael just referenced that is in design. And then the other one that was just referenced was Center Street from Locust and Titonia down to Center all the way to Humboldt, which connects to the Hopkins project that is under design as well, or in design as well.
Cool. Thanks. Do you have an update on the KK River Trail connections? Is that still in design?
It is wrapping up design. We are hopefully getting final approvals from the state DOT as we speak. We've been going back and forth with comments. There's a small stretch of that project that is on a state connecting highway. So we do need to get additional approvals from the state. So that project is still on track to be constructed this year, though.
Cool. And that the WisDOT segment is Pittsburgh, is that right?
And just for everyone's reference, the KK River Trail Connections project is this segment of Pittsburgh, which turns into the Broadway Bridge, which turns into Young, and then a little bit of Menominee. And then also South Water Street through here, but then also, a small stretch of Maple going down First Street to Lincoln. All of those segments are one project. The state connecting highway segment is Pittsburgh, Broadway Bridge, and Young.
32.
Yeah, State Highway 32.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Did any committee members have any questions on any of those projects?
Again, what was the status on Highland Boulevard into Avenue?
Yeah, we were just talking about this morning. So Highland is already built from Valete to 35th. We have 35th to 20th designed. Highland is currently a state connecting actually it's a state highway, I believe, US 14. Or State Highway 14, excuse me. We are working with the state to redesignate State Highway 14 and take it off of Highland Boulevard so that we can carry the design that exists west of 35th all the way east to downtown. What we're proposing would not be approved by the state on a state highway, so we're working with them to redesignate Highland Boulevard / Avenue to a local street, and that hopefully will happen this year. We're running through some analysis with the state to do that. And then we also have funding from 18th to 6th, and we will likely have funding for that 2-block stretch from 20th to 18th as well. So hopefully in the next year or two, all of Highland will be complete.
Mary's anxious for that one.
Well, I know it was delayed into this year, so Mike, even with going through all of that red tape with the state, are you thinking construction, even in the best case scenario, probably wouldn't begin until maybe best case scenario late this year, but probably next year?
No, I think we're hopeful that it will start this summer for the 35th
Oh, okay.
to 35th to 20th. We're hopeful. We'll have a little bit more information probably at our next meeting, but no, we're hopeful that we can make it happen this year still.
Cool. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Members
I
of
would just say real quickly that, this is just a very small snapshot of many projects that are happening both within the multimodal team, and Zach, Isabel, Danya, Marissa are all managing several projects, but there's many others that are also being managed by folks in our major projects group and others as well. So there's a lot happening. I definitely recommend checking out this map, and it's kept pretty up to date on kind of what's happening.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Any questions from members of the public? And you did.
Kay just asked about Roosevelt.
Not super familiar with.
Yeah, Mike, are you familiar?
Yes, I'm familiar with it. I'm glad someone else is as well. Thank you, Kate. Roosevelt's in its entirety runs from 60th and Burleigh up, kind of running northeast from there to 35th and Capitol. We're kind of thinking of that as two separate projects, with Fond du Lac kind of splitting the middle. So the southern segment from 60th and Burleigh to Fond du Lac, there was some pretty significant sewers work that was happening over the last couple of years. I think that's wrapping up here shortly this year. So we will pick that project up in design and finalize design probably this year. And then the segment from Fond du Lac to Capitol, we now have state ARPA funds to design and construct, and that needs to happen by the end of 2026. So that'll be picked up as well here shortly.
Cool. A lot of projects going on. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
I think with that, we can move on to the next agenda item unless there's a question or comment that somebody has. Otherwise, I think Mike dropped the link to the map in the chat.
I did not, but I will. Thank you for the reminder.
All right, thank you. We moved this down, but I think we can do the Vision Zero action plan item if you're ready, Jessica.
Yeah, I think it would be easiest to run the presentation. Okay. I will share my laptop screen and put this in presentation mode. Thank you, Martha. Yep. And Okay, other maps as well.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Weinberg, the Vision Zero Policy Director for the City of Milwaukee. We have been working on a Vision Zero action plan kind of over the last year, and I want to give you all an update on it and an opportunity to review some of our early documents, which are the recommendations and an executive summary. The full plan is in its final stage of writing and going to design, and then it'll be available for review as well. Oh, it's not. I forget it's not. Oh, did I go down? There we go. So how much time do I have? I'm sorry, that was my question. As much time as you can. Okay. But like 20, 15 minutes is okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Round 9, we'll wrap it up. Today I'll kind of briefly go through what is Vision Zero, our process, the community input that was really essential to the plan. And then I want to kind of focus on giving some time to look at the recommendations, although there's like 100, so it's a little weighty to review them. But some early thoughts from people in this room would be great. And then you can take a look at it on your own and give feedback. We'll talk about the plan. I can share the executive summary and then briefly about our next steps. What is the review process? And then we'll be adopting it and implementing it. So for anyone who's new, a key thing about Vision Zero is really the safe systems approach and trying to work in all these domains to have safe vehicles, safe road users, post-crash care that's safe and effective, safe roads and safe speeds. And I think Milwaukee has really been succeeding in the last few years in the safe speeds and safe roads work. Of course, there's much more to do and more funding is needed to deploy everything citywide. But as you guys just heard from Mike, like all these new projects really are focusing on safe roads and safe speeds for all users, not just drivers. Some of the key ideas or principles of Vision Zero are on the circle of this. So we're working in those 5 domains that you see there, but some of our key ideas are that death and serious injury is unacceptable. Humans make mistakes and our system has to be forgiving of those. Humans are vulnerable, especially people outside of cars, are very vulnerable to traffic crashes and the injuries. Responsibility is shared, and we're not going to point fingers at other groups. We're all going to do what we can. Safety is proactive, and we have to have redundancy. So again, if one part of the system, of the transportation safety system fails, someone does run a light. If they're going a safe speed, the impacts of that red light running would be less than if they were going faster. So that our interventions kind of layer together for more effectiveness. And please, if you have questions as I go, let me know. So our process, one of the first steps was looking at past plans. Everyone here who lives and moves around Milwaukee knows that unsafe driving has really been a concern for a while, and data-wise, it's around 2014 that we saw a big increase in overall fatalities and injuries. There have been some big increases in pedestrian crashes a couple of years before that as well. So people have been sharing concerns and ideas for safer streets that have been embedded in various plans for a long time. And I think when I looked at these kind of overall, it was about 50% of these past plan ideas have been implemented. And the first step was to take the 50% that hadn't been implemented and think about, are they still relevant? Do they not get implemented because they're too expensive, they're impossible, or something like that, kind of give them a test and then move them into a public process. And then we brought those remaining recommendations that hadn't been done but have been talked about before. Is that you?
They're both.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, Mitch is central on both these pictures unintentionally. But we brought those recommendations out to the public, mostly in the form of 2 public information meetings where people could vote and kind of just rehash and rethink, like, are these ideas still important and how do we prioritize among them to make sure if we adopt them again that we can actually deliver on them. So we had that past plan review. We also had MAP Go, which is it's the mayor's action for policies and progress group. So that's internal city departmental leaders who would be charged with implementing the plan, going over the public input and figuring out what are the key things we can do that are realistic and actionable. There is a community advisory committee that's helping to oversee the plan. And then we have this public input, and we're kind of braiding all of that in together to create the Vision Zero plan, and then we'll move into implementation. And thank you to anyone here who has participated in past planning efforts, even outside of Vision Zero. Those ideas are still important and get carried through in lots of work that the city does, including this plan. And then thank you, of course, if you participated in this public input for Vision Zero. So just a very brief overview of our public input. We had over 1,000 people participate, 81 people at 4 open houses. We did a special open house, both in person and virtual, with Independence First, to really try to elevate the needs and ideas of people with mobility challenges. We also had an online survey that on its own had, over 1,000 people, but we also took that. We didn't just let that be online, and that's why it's kind of in quotes. We brought that, thanks to the Bike Fed and the mobile repair program, we brought that online survey into parks, into community, and asked people to take the survey while they were getting their bike repaired. So that was a really good way to have areas that have higher crash rates be better represented in our survey data, because just a general online survey does skew white, richer, Bayview East Side compared to the city as a whole, where our traffic violence burden really is not in those neighborhoods. And so we're very thankful for that partnership to try to balance the surveys. And we also went to libraries and did the same kind of thing, did some intercepts. Just if you're walking in, do you want to talk to us about traffic safety in the community? Will you take a brief survey? So many people said yes. And I think that is definitely a method that I want to use in an ongoing way as a way to make sure we're not just getting people who want to talk about this issue's opinion, but really a better slice of everyone in Milwaukee. And multiple people at the libraries were just happy to give their feedback, even though it was a total cold conversation, which was highlighting what an important issue it is, I think. So across all those different methods, the public sentiment really was similar, and across racial groups. Everybody thought the number 1 and number 2 things broadly that we should do is design streets for safety over speed and enforce traffic laws. We definitely asked other detailed questions that dove into this that I'm not going to get into, but there will be a chapter in the plan that does. But I think this just kind of shows a direction we want to go. And enforce traffic laws, I think, it is complicated. And our very next follow-up question with that was how do you want it enforced? And I shouldn't go into this because I don't have a slide, but people said they wanted equitably. They said they wanted automated enforcement. They said they did want some traditional traffic stops. So it was a mix of things. And I think we can do enforcement right and not have it be the center of what we're doing. Any questions? Okay, and there's Anthony Casagrande, who was so great in getting us those surveys. So thanks for being at that park. So from all that input and review, these are really the big 7 ideas, big 7 goals we have that we think are essential to achieving Vision Zero. So as you read through these, we could think if there's one of these we want to look at as a group today.
I guess maybe all of these, there's a lot, right? With the city having varying levels of ability to accomplish them. Which one do you see the city as this is one where the city can make an immediate impact, right? Because there's a lot of federal or state or similar type things that are less.
Yeah, we have a role in all of these, and I think that's an important thing in a planning process is, the city led this process. So of course, we're highlighting things that we can take action on and then mutually calling out where we really need partners. So I would say, 6 and 7 are where we have the least role as the city. And so these are kind of roughly in the order of city control generally. So advocating for safer vehicles, and I think this is I'm answering backwards, but So probably number one, the built environment is where the city has the most control. That's where we've seen the most, I think, change over the last 5, 10, or 20 years, however you want to look at it. That's really positive. So that's where we have the most control. That's what you guys normally talk about, I think, a lot is the built environment. So just think for a second, do we want to dive into that again for our little 5-minute discussion, or do you want to mix it up?
That's a good point. Like outside of infrastructure, where is the city like potential impact?
Yeah. I think it's support accountability in the justice system with a focus on prevention. You know, the police are a city agency, city department, so they have a big role to play. And how do we have some enforcement and justice? That's one of the harder things to do, but I think that's something we need to work on. And then there's major county partners with that as well. And then at the opposite end, I just think it's kind of what we're talking about, advocating for safer vehicles and championing state law changes. There's critical things that have to happen there for Vision Zero to be achieved that are outside of the city's control, but are things we can push for. So in advocating for safer vehicles, for example, we really need to change federal crash testing standards, and this is actually happening, which is good, to include pedestrian safety measures. So we've made cars very safe for people inside of them and kind of ignored the impacts of those same vehicles when they hit people who are outside of the cars. And we need to stop doing that. And you shouldn't be able to get a 5-star crash rating unless you also are safe for pedestrians. It can't just be because it's safe for people inside the car. So we really need the weight of cars to go down, pedestrian safety to be included in car ratings, and then ideally have like automated intelligent speed assist where you can't go over the speed limit. Those would be the ideal 3 things. And then for state law changes, really it is automated traffic enforcement. Having a limited pilot program in Milwaukee is a really helpful thing. A comparable city, Albuquerque, saw about a 30% reduction in fatalities in the first 6 months of their automated traffic enforcement program. So that would, of course, have to be, you know, community driven and a lot of oversight. Even once we got if the legislation could pass at the state level, that's what is preventing us from doing it now. So we would need to bake equity into how we think about it and build a system that really works for Milwaukee. But it has real safety benefits, and we should push for that at the state level and try to implement it locally if the community wants to see that happen. Or we're making this trade-off that we're gonna have people die. More people die.
A couple of people raised their hands. Barry?
Yeah, oh my gosh, so much there that we could all discuss, right? I just want to note what was brought up like about 45 seconds ago. Really liked the note that you just said about how a car safety rating needs to be for people outside the vehicle as well. And I think we've all noted and we're all observing how this is a time with as great as electric vehicles from cars to bikes can be in other ways. You know, we are having cars now, including those that can accelerate super fast. And it was something I was just thinking about over the last several days of, you know, right now we are still in one era, but it could be in the coming years, another era of where it's going to be much easier to accelerate super fast. And I know that this was a discussion of, you know, federal changes, which, you know, seems much of a larger thing to look down on from our little community and our little group. But just curious from the perspective of our group and the perspective of just when we say, well, as a community, we come together to ask for these changes and such, you know, there are some of those go-to answers that will say like, well, we need to talk with our neighbors more and such like that. But are there any strategies when we discuss, you know, like from a state and federal level that we find are worth most considering from the from this particular group?
I have not gotten that far. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
one of the, so I'll go to like an example. I think we should not go to safe streets. You guys think about that all the time. So here we are, support accountability in the justice system with a focus on prevention. So we have a bunch of action ideas and have who is a likely lead and then some partners. The last column on the right is kind of the source where that idea came from. Is it an expert insight, which is kind of that star, that comment box is that it came from the public. And then the little piece of paper is that it came from a past plan, which means it also came from public input previously. But what I'm hoping to do as part of our review process is have some workshops where people break into groups for each of these big ideas and then kind of get to some of those ideas that you're sharing, Barry, of like, how could communities be active in implementing this, and let that be developed together.
Yeah, this is great. This is so smart. I mean, you know that, but I just want to say I see that too. Like, yeah, just the potential for building solidarity with these groups and or allies, I suppose, would be an even better word.
And this is like the hardest area, I think, the justice system, making sure that we balance like equity and prevention and accountability. And I will, you know, I talk to families who have lost loved ones, and that has kind of changed my view. And I think just as a community, we definitely, this cannot just be based on my views at all. And so as a community, we have to like enter into these big discussions about what's the role of law enforcement and the justice system. How do we define criminal behavior in the transportation system versus kind of just poor judgment? There's a lot of things we have to figure out through community conversation. So this definitely does not have all the answers. I could go to an easier one if there's anyone that someone was like, show me what you have for.
Well, I've got, on this note, correct me if I'm wrong, there's supposed to be someone from public safety serving on PBAC,
That's
correct?
Correct. It can be from the police department or the Department of Health. There might be police and fire or department.
So I mean, just like as a first place to start, like that, they're not even in the room today for this.
Yes, and I think that committee member is nominated by the mayor, if I remember right. I'd have to double check the ordinance.
I believe so.
If there isn't some, do you think maybe that position isn't filled?
It is not. I don't think
Okay.
it has been in the since this was formed, and I guess even before that.
I will talk to Captain Schlein, who's the main contact at the police working on these sorts of issues, and talk to him about who he might want to recommend and go back and forth with the mayor on, you know, that makes sense.
I think I remember it was either the last year or the year before. There was somebody from the Department of Public Health that was interested, but I don't remember the name. But
Yeah, and I mean, I see the high value for public health being involved.
But it should be an and.
Like, but it should be an and if MPD needs to be involved in this big piece here.
Yeah.
So that sounds like sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just calling, Monica had also raised her hand.
yeah, Monica.
Oh, thanks, Jessica. This is really informative. And just wanted to make the note, like some of those categories, number 3, the create vibrant, people-centered places. Just wanted to point out that is something like in the Department of City Development that we're working on all the time, often on a very incremental parcel by parcel basis. But again, just the point that's been made that these kind of recommendations and implementation require multiple different departments. You know, I'm in the Department of City Development, so this is something that's worked on. And yeah, maybe Jessica, I'll reach out to you offline, because now that this is shaping up, I think this would be really helpful to maybe share with others in the department. So thank you.
Yeah, happy to.
Barry?
Yeah, going off that too, this is where, and Mitch and PBAC members, we can all, continue this discussion, but this might be when we previously had our community partnerships subgroup, and we discussed, if that should just be absolved into everything else we do. But like when I look at like this graphic and think of like, all the potential groups to potentially work with on a certain, uh, you know, um, bullet point, etc., this is where maybe that could be something where who can sift through all that and figure out our lowest hanging fruit. This might be something for some eager uh, candidates on a subcommittee. I don't know, but otherwise, I just wanted to. I think Michael, you had just brought it up. Going back to it, then, are we saying that one of the things that we could hopefully speed up and grease the wheels on from our group is just getting a public safety rep finally filled? And is that something we want to reach out to the mayor on, or are we talking about? You were saying reaching out to the police captain
Yeah, it
to
sounds
get
like
going.
sounds like you'll look into that on some
And I can talk-
level.
Yeah, and I can talk to Marissa and Mike, who any of us could reach out. I'm
Cool.
sorry, I forgot.
Yeah,
It's your
no,
committee.
no, that would be
It's their committee. Yeah, it's their committee.
yeah,
We're all
that'd
here to serve.
be perfect.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
And then speaking to that idea of, what do we do next from all of this? We want to form a committee, a Vision Zero committee that'll help do some prioritization and building those community relationships to implement this plan. So some early steps, and that'll happen in this review process. That'll probably be in March, mostly the public review of the full plan and recommendations. You guys are kind of early reviewers before we do our full press. And then once the plan's adopted, maybe in say May, we will move to having a committee, forming a community committee that'll help advise us. And obviously members of this committee would be very welcome. I'm kind of out of time, so I briefly kind of went over our review process. Again, you guys are kind of these early reviewers, and I'll share through Marissa the actual documents of the recommendations, and then we also have kind of an executive summary of the plan. And I know it's weird to look at the summary without the plan, but the plan just takes a lot longer to make, but we have the basics, so we knew we could make the summary already. But the summary is really intended to be a public facing document that's like easy to read for a general resident, and has some tools for them. And so like, I especially appreciate kind of your insights on like, if we're achieving that or not. And then the plan itself, is much longer. It's not that fun to read. It's really like for people who want to work on this issue in depth. And I don't expect that many people to read it cover to cover, but to find like the chapter that they're interested in or need to know about and really dive in there. So you'll be welcome to review, of course, the full plan too, but right now we're looking for those kind of early reviewers on the executive summary and those recommendations. And I'll share those via Marissa. It probably won't be till Monday because there's an issue with our main PDF. I apologize about that.
Yeah, no worries. I guess my last question at least is like, what's the timeline? This has to go before the Common Council to be adopted and everything. Like,
Yeah.
Is there a target quarter?
May roughly is the goal of taking it to council, but really we want to make sure there's an appropriate review period. So it'll go to Common Council after the official public review. So that will be whenever it needs to be. A key deadline for everyone here to think about is the 29th. January 29th is when I'm requesting feedback on the recommendations and the executive summary. And for people that are in the room, I can hand out some copies of that if you like a paper copy. I don't know if there's any other questions. I'm a little over time.
I mean, I got one, and that is when you go back to your survey, the third thing on there was transit options. And yet in your action plan, you have nothing about advocating for better transit.
Mm.
It is in here. Yeah.
It's not a bullet point of like, no, this is something that's very important because if we're moneyballing this, the easiest way to get people to stop running into people is to get them off the road. And if we can get more people in a bus and less cars out there, that's the easiest way to do this.
Yeah, so support mode choice is like a subheading. And we did have some debates like, is it so important that it should be its own? But we really felt like that fell within the focusing on the high injury network and building safe streets for all. So in supporting mode choice includes transit. So 15, collaborate with transit operators to design and operate streets to support transit and transit users. Because the city doesn't control the transit system.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The city
Right.
doesn't control it. Is we need to request this stuff from Congress, and we need better budgets for them because they're not getting it. Obviously, they're shutting down more. They're planning on shutting down more in the future here.
Yep.
Around the funding again.
And so we also have some transit related things in number 7, champion state law changes. Secure, diverse and sustainable funding for transit. So number 10 on that list. Advocate for sustainable, adequate and dedicated transit funding, including safe first and last mile connections. And I will say the county plan has very similar language as well. And we are trying to really be united. And as far as,
I just wanted to
State
make
and
sure it
federal
was in there.
yeah,
Because it was like the third thing on your survey, and I was like, well, where is it?
yeah, it's, it is really important. And that's the thing to think about. Is that highlighted enough here? I've read all this. I'm like, oh, it's here, but it was not obvious to you that it's
Right.
there. But when we have 100 ideas, it's hard to make them all clear. So I welcome anybody's recommendations about if there's a way we can improve how this is shared. You know, one thing is making this, you know, easily accessible on the web where you can like easily search and see like, where is transit mentioned? And I should make sure like the word transit is everywhere we're talking about it, so that people can find it.
I think that's a good call out. And this is going back a little bit, but for the public health and safety member, it's a representative of the safety commission of the police department. I don't know if that's different. The fire department, the fire and police commission, or the health department. So
Okay.
those are the options.
And I should give a shout out to the health department. Amanda Richmond and the health department has been super helpful in creating this plan. And so like, there's very strong partnerships there. And that should be reflected on this committee perhaps too.
Yeah, that would be great. Are there any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I think
I had one on the state legislation. There's many groups that are going to be doing like lobby days around transportation. So are there any specific recommendations that advocates should be bringing to those groups that are starting to organize right now?
I think we should talk more offline in detail about what that could be. And I think, you know, what's needed and what is there an opportunity for? And are we either going for something that we think is likely with the current makeup, or we just want to put a stake in the ground and say this is really important to us, even if the state legislature is very unlikely to pass it. So it's kind of a big conversation that we should definitely have.
February 15th, there's like a convening, so.
Yeah, yeah. And our lobbyists would likely be, you know, interested in giving some advice. So yeah.
Okay.
That would be great to talk about more. So again, the ask is if you could review these documents, that'll be shared shortly with you by the 29th. And then it also, if you personally organize any meetings or community groups or know of any groups or that we should reach out to for sure when we go into that full public outreach, please feel free to share those with me. You know, of course, we have a list, but we're always looking for more places, and we'll just be like for a month kind of going out, giving a workshop, and then bringing that feedback back to update the plan.
thank you so much.
Thank you all. Good questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So our next agenda item is, data collection, right?
Yeah, data collection and also the schedule discussion, I think are the two remaining.
Yes. We'll start with data collection, I guess, which I think is Zach.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yes, I can speak to the data collection a bit here. First off, I just lead with that, you know, we really focus primarily on collecting speed data. Right now, you know, crash data is obviously very important, but it kind of runs on a different timeline. Ideally it's like 3 to 5 years after a project, you would have, at like a 1 year checkpoint, we could also kind of get shorter term kind of crash data, but it really takes a little bit more time to look at that. And that's like the goal of a lot of these projects, right? Is to improve, obviously improving safety. That's the most direct measure of that. But the proxy that we use to understand the impact of our projects more quickly is speed. We know that only 13% of people that are hit by a car at 20 miles per hour have a life-changing or a fatal injury. That jumps to 40% at 30 miles per hour, 73% at 40 miles per hour. So, we really know that speed is that's the measure that we can tell from a project, that it's improving safety conditions out on the street. So that's what we really are focused on primarily at this point. The Complete Streets Handbook kind of lays out some best practices that the Department of Public Works uses when we're collecting data. So, for kind of where data is collected, it's on a longer project, we want to get a study at least every half mile, or along kind of different kind of typologies of this, types of the street out there. We also, ideally it's 1 year after project installation is when we collect after data. So it does take some time for a project, right away after a project, there's kind of an adjustment period as people are getting used to the new conditions out on the street. And so we want to make sure we're getting kind of a representative, after data. We, aim for kind of a similar time of year for before and after data, primarily in the summer, but also in the spring and fall. We want to do like midweek studies, so Tuesday to Thursday, in a 48-hour period. So that, the kind of way we collect this is using like radar units that are out on like poles installed in the street. They'll go up for 48 hours, measure the speed of vehicles as they move by and the number of vehicles. And so that's kind of the main method that we do this through. In 2024, we collected 90 studies, and this is like really department wide across a wide variety of projects from different groups and stuff. We get a sampling of these different projects, larger projects, almost, we pretty much always have, before and after data that we'll be, collecting. But we have a lot of smaller improvements around the city that go up in, like for example, the raised crosswalks around the city. There's dozens of those that have been going in, and we get kind of a sampling of a few of those to kind of be able to measure their impact. This year, 2024, those 90 kind of different studies we did were collected, from March through November. Most of them in this case were before studies. The mayor did hold an event. You may have been kind of a press event you may have heard in the news in August that was highlighting some of the after data that we got for this year, and it showed really promising results. That event kind of highlighted a kind of variety of different projects, road diets, traffic calming, protected bike lanes, from across the city. Some kind of highlights from that, the Lapham Boulevard protected bike lane saw a 33% reduction in speeding. The 43rd Street road diet from a few years ago showed a 24% drop in speeding. That's over 10 miles per hour over the speed limit. Locust Street on the kind of in the Sherman Park neighborhood that had an 86% drop in speeding and a 28% drop in excessive speeding. So there's some individual projects that have really big numbers there. But I think something that we've done kind of an analysis on. Shout out to Jessica for helping kind of get this concept together too. Is kind of we wanted to kind of get a general idea of the impact of these projects, and we found that after the traffic calming interventions were implemented in select projects that we actually have before and after data for over the past several years, drivers were 26% less likely to speed and 46% less likely to drive 10 miles per hour or more over the speed limit compared to before those projects were implemented. And so that's across a wide variety of different street safety projects. And we really have been seeing a positive impact, and we obviously continue to kind of plan to do data collection, and at this point, I think next year, a lot of we'll have a lot more after data for the projects that have gone in this year, which has been a busy year. So that's just kind of I guess a little insight into that process. But yeah, it's definitely something that we focus on doing throughout the life of projects, and through every year we make a focus of doing that. So I don't know, any questions or anything?
Yes, is this something that happens for every project that multimodal is involved in? Just about?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think there's a lot of, I guess it's how you define a project, right, too, because we may be installing traffic calming improvements across a large area as part of a project. But these individual locations, we do not get before and after data for every single one because, in a lot of cases we know that they're generally a similar impact. And so we kind of focus on getting a sampling of those. For larger projects, we definitely do, every project, but yeah, so that's kind of what I would speak to that is, yeah, we get a lot of, there's a lot of work going on out there, and we do a lot of data collection, but we don't hit every single minor project.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess for any like medium to large project that's, multiple blocks long and has multiple pieces of infrastructure or a significant road change, is that fair to say that like there's probably
Yeah,
a speed study
I'd
happening
say
for?
I'd say generally, yeah, those are very likely happening.
Does this also apply for major projects? Like, is there?
I guess I would just say, we look at this as like a department-wide kind of effort to look at when the city is doing projects, what are we collecting? You can see the project map on the Department of Public Works website that has, we don't, I think, we don't want to think of these as, into little sections of who is managing the project. We think of them as a department as a whole. And so that's, yeah, that's kind of what I'm speaking to is those, just the whole, all of the projects that we're looking at, not just multimodals managed projects.
Yeah, right.
And I can just say, speaking for major projects, like we don't go out there and take studies afterwards, mostly because it's not in our budget to do that kind of stuff. But I'm sure multimodal will be happy to go out there and look at this kind of stuff if we need to. But also, because we're doing complete reconstructs most of the time, it doesn't make sense to go out there for at least 2 to 3 years because of the traffic patterns that if we shifted them in the first place, the people who used to take that roadway because of construction are now taking something else. And it might take 2 to 5 years for them to get back to that. Is the pattern again?
And so there is. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I would say to that we Stephen, you may not have be directly involved in obviously how we're collecting data, but we collect data for all we've been collecting data for a variety of projects outside of just the multimodal units. So we do collect after data. We plan to collect after data for those major projects as well. And yeah, typically we try to get 1 year after is what we aim for. So I just highlight that.
Like, I mean, was Humboldt Boulevard a major project? Does that count as a major project or no? Yeah. Okay. And so like Howard, I would also assume.
Yeah.
When would that?
And so like, yeah, you're going to wait another year or 2 years after now before you actually go back there and start taking the data.
Right.
Yeah, there would have been people who like now take 794 to go around or something like that. But
Yep. Yeah. And so for a project like Howard, which was pretty significant, would we expect to see speed data there? Because I think that was that reduced lanes, right?
Yeah, we got
From
rid
2 to
of lane there.
or 4 to 2, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that something that you got before speed data on, offhand? Is that?
I don't know offhand.
Yeah, that's all good.
I mean, on a reoccurring basis, WISTOT requires us and everybody across the state to I think it's every 3 to 5 years to have bare minimum road counts done. So I mean, at least then that's happening. I can't remember what the speed counts tables were Matt, as far as how often they had to do it.
But there's
it's been like state law or whatever that we actually do have to keep track, or policy and DOT that we have to keep track of that.
so there's some interval for
Then you can
major
find it at
streets
yeah.
for DOT.
Just call up the travel survey shop over there at WISTOT.
So you could see
Set you up.
even if the city doesn't do it, you could look at potentially speed and traffic data for the section of Howard that was reconstructed before and after, whenever those get done. Okay. Did any committee members have any questions or comments on this? I guess for me, there was speed. Is that like kind of the primary one? I know crashes are obviously less frequent. And so it's hard to get a meaningful understanding over a shorter time period. But are there other pieces of data or elements, even if it's not necessarily quantitative, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes we'll do, like turning movements, videos, video counts, and our staff will kind of like, counting those different turning movements, or if there's a certain improvement maybe, or a certain location where there may be some sort of kind of like traffic flow issue or something like that. I know I don't know if Danya is on here, but I know that there's been other instances of kind of more like, with some slip lanes that the city closed, looking at kind of yielding kind of behavior type things in there, and that's kind of one of the main other types of studies I guess we would do, which don't happen as frequently necessarily, but looking at actually kind of observing in the field, or sample like testing how frequently vehicles are yielding to people at specific kind of crosswalks that maybe have had improvements as well.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Any questions from anyone? Committee members or members of the public? My last question then, I guess, is there will be speed studies for projects that happened last year, this spring, summer, and so we'll start to see some results from last year around spring or summer this year.
Yep. Yeah, we conducted studies last year, March through November. So, we aim to, do the after studies for projects that we got before data for at around a similar time as we collected that data last year.
Cool. That sounds great. I look forward to seeing that. It looks like we have a hand raised from Brian. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks so much. Question with regard to the types of projects that are developed and the scope of them, like for instance, if it's a reconstruction project, on one end all the way to, some type of a safety improvement, even just like a flexible delineator, paint and post. I mean, is it fair to say that probably, generally speaking, the greater the scope of the project to address safety as part of like a reconstruct would have more safety benefit than, an immediate rapid implementation? Again, I mean, this is very general because I know each project's different and what was installed, but I'm just wanted to ask that as a question, a clarifying question.
Could you ask it, or could you kind of rephrase? I don't know who exactly.
I think the question is like, if the scope of the changes is larger, does that usually result in a bigger reduction in speed? Is that kind of what you're after, Brian?
Yes. Thank you for reframing my really poor question. And it's speaking very generally because we've seen great data from just some of those immediate safety improvements that have been taking place throughout the city. And I'm just wondering how that kind of computes with, if we're going to have really stronger data with like a full reconstruction, it takes years out. Is that even something that we're able to, we just collectively determine now, or is it a case where, what is this essentially making the case for, the need for full-on reconstructions and greater scope of project improvements? It's a kind of, it might be, is that a difficult case to make when you don't necessarily have the data coming in sooner than later? Essentially, the best looking data may be down the line, whereas like what you have now just may not be as strong to try to make a case for any type of budget improvements.
I would say a few things to that. I would say one is that we see really significant, benefits from even smaller, in scope, smaller, retrofit type traffic calming improvements. I think, complete reconstructions are great on but they, I think you can also do, a complete reconstruction may have, a curb extensions at this intersection, and it may have, a speed table at some point, and we can also make those improvements without necessarily reconstructing the whole street. And I think you can see a similar reduction, similar, a lot of these projects that we've that I've called out as having really major improvements weren't necessarily complete reconstructions. Like Lapham, the protected bike lane I mentioned, that a 33% reduction in speeding. That was paint and post type protected bike lane improvements there. Locust Street, that those are kind of spot traffic calming improvements. So I think that we do see a really strong benefit from even non-reconstruction projects, although those are always great to do, but obviously money wise, those obviously take a lot more. There's a lot more to that with all the utilities and all that kind of stuff. I think that that's kind of what I would say to that. I don't know if Marissa, if you would any other city folks want to add to that, I guess, but I think it's important to note that all these types of projects we see generally good results from. So
yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you. You're going to get more bang for your buck at some of these smaller projects with the pin downs and stuff like that. But you won't get a safer street. It won't be smooth or anything. That's kind of up in the air, right? Like that just means people can drive faster realistically. So the side stuff and everything that makes people slow down. That's not something that we should scoff at or whatever. It's I think it's very important. The major project stuff is really like National Avenue. The reason why it really needs to get done is all the soils underneath there are garbage. Like it'll keep doing that no matter what we do on top of it. So we have to go out there and redo everything. And so some of these other ones, North Avenue or whatever, they're easy enough to just throw something down there in good enough shape and it does the job. But moreover, from a design standpoint, it tells us in the future, like, well, maybe we didn't want to do that, or maybe this was a good idea and we didn't spend an extra $1 million to do it. So
I wanted to,
Thank you.
oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying thank you. That's very helpful.
I wanted to add something there also, which is that, it's like a reconstruction or like something that there are many reasons why we make improvements to our built environment, right? And some of them are, we have areas that haven't had a lot of investment in some of the, public right of way for a long time, and people feel the impact of that, like living in a neighborhood where they see things that are in disrepair. One example, and so I guess what I would say is, I don't think we should expect to see the full impact of some of our bigger projects or projects with a little bit more investment in them from speed data. So I would discourage us from looking at that only as like the measure of our progress moving forward. One example is that some of the slip lanes that we close with paint and post, relatively small impact, relatively small cost can be a very big impact on how people feel about their, how safe people feel about their, walking environment and crossing an intersection. And that, I think Zach was kind of mentioning this earlier, it is harder to measure some of that because it is qualitative often. Or you're trying to measure something that isn't happening, like you're trying to measure the absence of a potential conflict. But then one other thing I wanted to say is, like, when we, for example, at Highland and 27th, a mural in the slip lane, if you haven't seen the mural in the slip lane at Highland and 27th that was installed this past year, I recommend that you go see it or look at some photos. The good feedback we got from residents that live around that intersection from seeing not only the close of the slip lane, but the kind of like improvement to their visual, their community, like the visual improvement and feeling like someone cared about their experience in the neighborhood was really great and only measurable through survey. So I think it's hard to fully capture the benefit of everything through speed and every, so for example, like a full reconstruction on Center Street is important because people really care that their neighborhood looks good. Like that's something I just want us to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It isn't limited to just speed.
I'd like to also mention that the major project reconstructions have the benefit of being less limited by utility conflicts. A lot of times in our quick rapid implementation projects, that can really control what we end up being able to do and can also limit our ability to do like green infrastructure or trees, which are really important to a lot of communities. So definitely get a lot of benefits from those major reconstructions.
Limiting because you can't put something on top of a utility that's underground or something where it could be moved if it was a full reconstruction. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah.
Standalones have different effects depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
Got it. That makes sense. So there's a PDF that has the traffic calming project impacts that I found on the DPW website. Could that be dropped in the?
Sure. I don't have it up.
It's under infrastructure,
Okay.
education and resources.
I can navigate to that and drop it in the chat while you discuss.
I think it mentions all of the projects from, or this would have been, I guess, the ones from that were constructed in 23 with the reports released last year. Great. Were there any other questions or comments? If not, thank you, Zach. Thank you, Danya, and everybody else that shared on that topic. I think our last, at least official agenda item.
Sorry, one moment. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Was our meeting schedule. We discussed it a little bit last time. I didn't see anything come through about or discussion on changing our schedule for this year. So at this point, at least I'm inclined to hold it until we have some more discussion. If that makes sense to everybody on the committee.
Makes sense to me.
Cool. With that, we can get into work groups. So targeted improvements. We didn't meet, but I've been emailing a little bit with DPW on speed limits, specifically on our on the new Washington Bike Boulevard. It's signed at 30 miles an hour, which feels high for a bike boulevard. And so there's some potential complications maybe with it being designated as a through highway or something. I don't know, but I would like to see it lowered. And so that's one of my targeted improvements that I get a better understanding of, and also any potential other streets that are signed for this above the city's default, I guess, especially neighborhood streets like that. Did the projects work group meet at all?
Nope.
What about policies?
We got together, well, Kathy and I got together, a subset of the group got together last week, and we were chatting about circling back around to the snow plowing discussions in light of the recent city council discussions on that, and talking about how it might be worth it for us as a policy work group to express an opinion that if we're talking about like the quality or the level of service that we provide in our snow plowing operations, like for the roads, you know, if something like dramatically increasing the level of services on the table, that shouldn't just be reflected for roadways. We should consider like what our sidewalks look like, what our intersections look like, and bus stops. So there's a brief discussion of that. And I think we're looking forward, obviously, like this year, like we're in the snow season now, so hard to make changes midstream. But we're also going back to our issue matrix that was identified to figure out what other points we can push on this year.
Yeah, excellent. I think, yes, there was also some discussion last year about sidewalk clearing as well. But I look forward to anything on that. I think that is anything or everything we have for the agenda, unless anybody from work has anything they want to add on work groups. Hearing nothing, we can move to new business, things we'd like to discuss next month. I'm going to add those speed limits on Washington Street and potentially more. We hope to have some better understanding by then, potentially something that we can vote on or advocate for. Is there anything else we wanted to discuss next week or plan on discussing next month? That is fine.
Can I add something?
Please.
Is there any room to make like small improvements without like reconstructing a whole street, or temporarily before you do like a reconstruction of a street? Like for instance, like North Avenue when you're approaching the bridge over the freeway, east and west, it's very dangerous, like for bikers, because going east, when you cross that bridge, you're like relegated to be in the gutter because the lane opens up, it opens up to 2 lanes, and cars are speeding by, and you're pushed into that gutter because there's no bike lane or anything there. And then to veer back, you're still in the gutter when you get to 7th Street, and then those cars are coming off the freeway really fast, and then they want to make that right turn right there, and so you have to make sure they stop to make that turn before you have to veer back into the bike lane. And it's the same kind of trouble when you're going west, because when you approach 7th Street, because the bike lane disappears on 6th Street, and then you're sandwiched between traffic on your left and traffic on your right that want to make that right turn to get onto the freeway. And then also people don't always make that turn. They use that because it opens up to 2 lanes again. They'll use that the right lane to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to watch to make sure nobody is using that right lane, because you can't get back over, to the right lane if people are passing on your right. So like, is there any room for improvements like that? Like,
yeah.
So,
sorry, could you like introduce yourself briefly?
Oh, my name is Amar Insaram, and I'm the chair of Red Biking Green Milwaukee. So and then like also like any road where say there's unprotected bike lanes, you're in a bike lane, and any like street where it's any kind of bend in a road,
Mm-hmm.
Cars, like 90% of the traffic veers into the bike lane. So if it's something like that could be done, it's like just on a small scale, like for any being in a road like that is,
Yeah, I think for our role, we can definitely advocate for things like that. Projects that the city takes on is ultimately up to them. But I think your point is very well made. The city has a lot of unprotected painted bike lanes. And sometimes where they just disappear.
They just disappear, yeah.
And figuring out how to maintain those connections, especially through stressful parts over all of the freeways. There are very few crossings for our freeways.
Part of the problem with the freeways is those bridges are WISDOT bridges. They're not the city's bridges. So we have to go to WISDOT to talk to them about putting it down. They're usually okay with us putting stuff on it,
But it kind of, I mean, to Amar's point, there's a couple issues. Like, so even thinking of Lisbon reconstruction with the protected bike lane, the main conflict point is still where the interstate passes there. Like, for all of the good design that went in, that's still, like, for someone that's not as seasoned as a cyclist as some of us in this room, that's going to kind of prevent, and especially at North Avenue, people will say, I don't see people biking across North Avenue. Well, yeah, because nobody feels safe doing it, not even the seasoned cyclists. So, you know, those are big conflict points if we want to increase ridership. But maybe someone in the room can, or on the call can, Amar's other point, which maybe you can't do at that part, but where we're at with the neighborhood traffic management program and like the lending library kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that is I've forgotten about that, but I think that's a good point. Can somebody speak to the neighborhood traffic call management program and TMP?
Yes. The neighborhood, whatever it was, and management program is pretty much, I would say, morphed into something else. So I would encourage us to use a new acronym, the Community-Led Traffic Calming Program, CLTC. I'm not sure, have we ever given like a little overview about what that is to PBAC? That would be a great thing to do. So we have a guidebook that DPW put together about all of the different types of traffic calming that can be requested through that program by residents. It's then, as some of you in the room probably know, it goes through a process of getting, it's resident led. You have to get signatures, and then it's assessed through tax assessment to the residents within a certain kind of distance from that traffic calming measure. It's not typically used for bicycle facilities. And yeah, Mike is putting in here that recommending a future item for this, I think, would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think we had a presentation on the previous iteration, the neighborhood traffic management, whatever the previous name was, at least a year ago. But I think a new presentation on kind of the current process, what's available, and how residents can make requests. But I guess in the near term for Amar, there's an email address, there's a guidebook. I think if you do search for the city's community-led traffic calming, do they just email? Is that the gist of it to get it started? Or take a look at the guidebook. It'll have all of the instructions. Is that
the guidebook has a step-by-step process?
Cool. Thank you.
Can I add a little something? Part of what I heard in Amar's comments was the difficulty of crossing the interstate, and definitely interstate entrance and exit ramps provide, big issues. One way to consider addressing that is to make sure we maintain and possibly improve all bridges over interstates that don't have access ramps. And I'm saying it that way to include like Brown. Brown is such a great way to go over the interstate. But also there's a number of bike and ped bridges over the interstate that seem to be in kind of disrepair. Everything else on the interstate seems to be getting improved. And there's these very sad, very lonely, very uncared for.
They can be kind of tight too,
right? They're not really designed for bicyclists. If you have a trailer, you actually often can't get through it very well unless you're like an expert. So I just think maybe I'm just kind of throwing out there that like maybe people want to consider like making sure we advocate that none of those get removed in the future. Yes, we want improvements where there's ramps also, but it's so important, and there's a reason why these bike ped bridges were put in at some point. And that's just like an important kind of access thing as freeways are getting improved. food for thought.
Yeah, I think that's a
They're
good
getting
point.
expanded.
I'm sorry.
As they're getting expanded.
Right, and yes,
I'm gonna make a note of that.
and I'm not saying that to say we don't need North Avenue also improved, but how do we get a both and?
Mhm. And those,
Like one ride where we end up going over that little skywalk, little bridge walk.
Oh, yeah.
these are just typically, highways are typically gonna be state involved or primarily, just for clarity. Yeah, I will add bridges over highways to my notes. I think that is one of the biggest barriers that we have. I think with that, and thank you for your comment. I think we can move into events and announcements. So if anybody has events or announcements over the next month or so, public feedback meetings, rides, other fun bicycle or pedestrian related things. No January or February events?
Too cold.
For people in the room, I have bumper stickers for speeding. We can live without it, and window clings. If you want to take some for yourself or to give out, feel free. Spanish too.
I just updated what like Fed Safe Routes team is up to. We'll be at NPS's kindergarten enrollment fairs at North and South Division, with really to promote the district's traffic gardens, and that like programs are being expanded. So that's kind of a kick to increase enrollment in the district and then show families that these spaces exist in their neighborhoods as safe places. So
The dates on this?
Saturday, January 2nd or 3rd, whichever that first one is at South Division. I'm not certain we'll be at that one, but for sure, February. But for sure, North Division on the 18th, we'll have a big presence there and auctioning off some, raffling off some Strider bikes. Cool. So the one at North Division, I can send that out to you, Stephen. So if you know people with kindergarten age kids to send them over.
Where was the second or third one?
At North Division High School on, I think the 18th.
Sorry, hang on. Were there two? One on the 18th at North Division and the other one?
Yeah.
South Division. Thank you. Cool. Got it.
South Division on February 1st. And North Division on Saturday, February 22nd.
Okay.
Do you want to mention Lobby Day?
Oh, Bike Fed doesn't have our formal lobby day yet, but it will be in March. But there's active transportation folks meeting in Madison on February 15th through Sierra Club to just kind of get everybody on the same page who's on first about different transportation issues. So I'll be heading there. Bike Fed's in the process of hiring a new government affairs manager. So I volunteered to kind of get the ball rolling for when they're on staff.
Michael, minor adjustment. I believe that March 5th is going to be our advocacy day at the Capitol.
Bike Fed's March 5th. Thank you, Mayor Beth.
I will add every month, critical mass will be the last Friday at 6 p.m. at Red Arrows. So that'll be January 31st this month. Short, not fast ride, should be kind of party pace. We'll enjoy ourselves and end somewhere that isn't decided yet, but usually a 5 to 10 mile ride. Any other events or announcements? With that, I would hear a motion to adjourn for today.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn from Michael. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Anna. Hearing no objections, we will adjourn for the weekend or the rest of Friday and then the weekend. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, DPW, for staffing and sharing your knowledge. And all of the community members that came. Appreciate everybody. Have a good weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.
How can
Bye.
the email list so to make sure we get the agenda and the notes and everything?
I think that's through email. Is that right? Melissa? Good, like feedback.